Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, although I would be surprised if any children are listening to this, welcome to History Abhors, a podcast, the Legacy of Kain podcast, where we are going to be delving into all the nooks and crannies of our very favourite Shakespearean Gothic vampire fiction series from the late 90s. I say we because I'm joined not only by the voices in my head, but by three gentlemen who are going to help me explore all these various nooks and crannies. First of all, from, well, I would say the country, but most of you will be American and probably can't place it on a map. But what would a podcast about vampires be without an Eastern European? It's Chrome. Chrome, how you doing?
Hey, I'm fine. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. And coming at us from Texas, he's a gruff cowboy with a heart of gold and a wardrobe full of anime hoodies and nothing else. Temp, say hi to everybody.
Hey, what's going on?
And up from Arkansas, wondering why he can't marry all the pretty boys himself, it's Django.
Oh, I can. I just choose not to.
Of course you can, buddy. And what would any podcast about vampires be without a drunken Irishman just to kick everything off? So that's me, and I will be your host, Sevatar. So, gentlemen.
Sevatar.
Sevatar, yes.
Awesome.
I'm sorry, I can't get rid of the accents, and I consider you racist for mocking my accent.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
You should apologise. But you should also be donating to my PayPal thing as reparations. Okay, so this is going to be our first episode, obviously, because there was no ones before it. And what we were going to do today is just kind of a general discussion of the appeal of Legacy of Kain, why we're interested in it, why it has kind of an enduring appeal for us 2 decades, more or less 2 decades. When was defined? 2004?
Oh,
2003, I think.
that number gets more painful every year.
Yeah, I mean, I was 9, and the rest of you were like 25 because you're all 50.
Exactly.
Exactly. And so why it still has
Nearly so.
why it still has such an enduring appeal for us, and maybe I don't know whatever that covers, it covers. So with that said, who wants to kick us off? Chrome, why don't you kick us off and tell us about why you like the Legacy of Kain and why we're doing a podcast on it 20 years later.
Well, given the Shakespearean literary art in its dialogue, also its standalone-ish and kind of unique feel, it's kind of like a really, how should I say, outstanding game. Really, really, really unique in its setting, in its general tone, in its method of conveying its story. One of the few games that actually intends to tell a story as its primary goal. And it's like altogether, it's kind of like a freak of game. Like it has that millimeter perfection of everything coming together, all perfect. And maybe aside from the gameplay, but like as a story, it's one of my favorites.
And as an Eastern European, presumably it gladdens your heart to see yourself represented in culture as vampires because you're all vampires.
Well, we are not. We don't have a monopoly on vampires, but we did leave our stamp
No,
on
you do have a
vampire
monopoly
stuff.
on sexy vampires, though. I think. We'll go to the southern.
Depends.
I'm not that sexy. Don't worry, Chrome. It's fine. So we'll go to our southern friends. Temp, why don't you tell us why you like the Legacy of Kain, and bonus points if you can get through it without mentioning Catholicism.
We'll get
Well,
to
you-
it.
I think the reason why I bought Soul Reaver is a little different from why I like Soul Reaver. So I, I had an EGM magazine covering the game long before it came out. I feel like it took forever for that damn game to come out. And I really liked the idea of the gameplay loop. I liked the idea of soul stealing inside like gameplay. That sounded very fascinating to me. And it looked very fascinating as well. And plus I was a Mortal Kombat fan, so I'm like, one of the things I don't love about Mortal Kombat is some of the coolest things are regulated to cinematics and finishers. So that was already a huge appeal to me, but I just liked the way the game looked. I liked Raziel. That's all. I did not even know it was a sequel to Legacy of Kain, I think, until like right before I bought the game. So but the reason why I still like the game today, the reason why I'm on this podcast at all is because I think it does a few things right that to date no other game has ever done. I don't think anything has ever done world immersion better than Soul Reaver. I think it is still number one in that category. I feel like the level design, although often bad at times, I think the bad aspects is kind of what makes it good. I really feel like I'm exploring a foreign dystopia. And I don't think I've ever felt that to the extent in other games I've ever felt that in Soul Reaver. Maybe age might have something to do with that, but I feel like I'm exploring a video game, but not in Soul Reaver.
Could you say that again?
Oh, Siri,
My
hold
apologies.
on. Siri is being awful. Siri, this has nothing to do with you. I don't appreciate that. We will talk later. But yes, so
just to go back there, Temp, to when you said the reason you're on this podcast is one of the reasons you're on this podcast. I suspect is because you have maybe 6 friends in the world. The 3 of us, Siri, and 2.
that is true.
And 2 guys you play Guilty Gear with.
Yeah, the 6 people are that's probably the correct number. That's not a lot, dude. Even back in like 2001 when I played the game, I don't know if there were a lot of Soul Reaver fans. So it was sort of my job to spread the gospel, and I did that the best I could.
I bought the game. I bought Defiance. As I say, I'm a little younger than everybody else. Don't worry, Django. I'm not forgetting you, baby. I will come back to you.
It's fine. Go ahead.
I bought Defiance when I was about 10 because I thought it looked badass. I had no idea what Legacy of Kain was. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I still remember putting the disc in, and I think everybody here prefers Soul Reaver, but I hugely prefer Defiance, just for the memories and hearing like given the choice, what was a king to do. That just sold me. But up until actually Django started streaming Soul Reaver, geez, was that a year ago? Maybe a year and a half ago?
Kinda.
I didn't really realize there were other fans of Legacy of Kain. I thought it was just me. And then I saw everybody in the chat, and the genesis was born. But Django, I did promise I'd come back to you, and I always will. Why don't you tell us why you like Legacy of Kain and how you got into it?
I'm trying to think of how I did. I think the first game that I actually played. Well, no, I was hanging out with a cousin of mine who's a little bit older, and he's playing Soul Reaver 2.
Well, it's lucky it was a he, because obviously in Arkansas, if your cousin was a she, it'd be a different dynamic.
Yeah. We wouldn't be playing Soul Reaver.
No.
Yeah. No, but yeah, this was a he. So we were playing Soul Reaver. He was playing it. I was, dude in the chair pretty much. And it was just really fucking cool. I mean, that sounds like you guys have covered it already. Like, Raziel, he looks sick. He fucking looks sick. You start playing the game, that shit looks sick. Then you start playing, then you listen to the game, and you hear the music, by the way,
Top notch.
Voice acting, and so, like, all this stuff, like, it's kind of like Def Leppard, where there's so many hooks going on, something's gonna grab you. It's just, like, there's something for everyone in here. If it's not the acting, it's the character design, it's the world building, it's the fucking scope, it's vampire bullshit, it's literariness, it's vocabulary.
I'm trying to think if anybody in Legacy of Kain is missing an arm, so I can make a joke about Def Leppard's drummer, but I'm coming up blank. One thing I think that I think Chrome and Django both mentioned is like it's and something that really stood out to me. No offense, Temp. We always value your contributions.
No, of course, absolutely.
But again, you didn't mention Catholicism, so attaboy. It's vampire fiction, but it's a different kind of vampire fiction. Like it is Indeed. Distinctly something itself, because I think to this day it's probably true that vampire fiction, like a huge part of vampire lore is kind of sex and romance, but I think that's almost entirely absent in Legacy of Kain, aside from Blood Omen 2, and we don't speak of Blood Omen 2.
Yes.
We'll speak of it eventually.
You can speak of Blood Omen 2. I'm not talking about Blood Omen 2. But because I remember at the time I'm pretty sure I'd already read Interview with the Vampire and The Vampire Lestat. Now, I didn't fully appreciate the subtext of the books, if I can put it that way. But I kind of knew, and I'd watched a little bit of Buffy and that kind of stuff. Hadn't read Dracula at the time. But I knew that vampire lore was already kind of wrapped up in romance and romanticism and this kind of very emotional, heartfelt stuff. But then you get to Legacy of Kain, and it's like, no, this is just this is just dynastic politics and time travel and super races and all this metaphysics and this incredibly bizarre stuff. So I really do think it stands alone, maybe not alone, but certainly in kind of modern vampire fiction. Like, you're not going to get many girls like having a battle of Team Kane versus Team Raziel. Like, that's not gonna. I'm sure there is.
No, it's just guys.
I mean,
Given that one is a chitinous undead overlord, is the second is like a corpse that is being dragged to hell and back, missing a lower jaw. I think that's a given.
well, look,
Something for
I mean, I've seen some good-looking girls go with some absolutely fuck ugly dudes, but I think that would be pushing it to its limits. But that is something that really stood out to me. That it's taking vampires in a very, very, I don't want to say different direction, because I don't have a monopoly on or I don't have a mental monopoly or an omniscience on all things vampire. But I certainly can't recall anything that treats vampires and vampirism the same way that Legacy of Kain does. Does anybody else kind of have that experience?
Yeah, that's a really, really good observation, and
Thank you.
I thought the same thing, and it's something that I really liked about it too. I also, it's always just been the thing with me, where it's like, if you're gonna do vampires, I don't like them fucking. I don't like them having sex.
Well, that's
I
a
don't
pity.
like that. That doesn't work for me.
So you
Like,
basically don't like anything to do with vampires aside from Legacy of Kain.
no. There's other vampires that are like this.
Django, you
But,
listen
like,
to Typo Negative and you don't like vampires having sex. Half of Typo
listen,
Negative
hold
songs.
hold on, sir. I don't mind vampires using sex as like bait and allure, but that's something different than vampires actually having sex, because that's not how vampires procreate. Unless you want to do dampiers, which let's hold off. No, let's not talk about that right now. But
And
like,
even then,
even then, it's like fucking zombies. Zombies don't procreate by having sex. If they don't have sex, thank
I mean-
God, they procreate by fucking eating each other. and
that's
shit.
that's the
Get that way.
principle of the undead, the revenant,
Yes.
that it is barren of all life, and even then, like Legacy of Kain kind of subverts that, because big spoilers here in Legacy of Kain, the vampires
said
are
spoilers.
Yeah, I should
not
say,
actually
like,
undead.
caveat lector. Anybody who, not caveat lector, caveat auditor. Anybody who listens to this is full spoilers.
I think we're kind of okay if we try
Yeah,
to
it's
pull
been
off
out- it's
Latin,
been
but
out
even
20
like the
fucking
first Legacy
years.
of Kain kind of misdoes Latin quotes as well. Like I still remember Manus Celer die being mispronounced, but that's just a tidbit.
But no, yeah, you're right. The vampire observation, and then vampires was a big deal in the '90s. I watched a lot of Buffy. I like Buffy.
I think
a
we all
lot.
did
I've
watch
seen
a lot of
that
Buffy.
show a ton. I mean, dude, Faith, and still,
Sorry, I just want to clarify something here. Faith, not a chance. Cordelia. It's all about the Cordelia.
you can do whatever you want.
You
with
may continue.
Cordy. Whatever. Yeah, I like the aspect of vampires that this thing created. Because I don't know, I feel like vampires are rooted heavily in like romanticism and shit like that, but that doesn't necessarily mean fucking. Like, you can have other giant
Yeah.
like
Well,
soul wrenching desires and these like big over the top themes and stuff that's not necessarily about
Well, the idea of the vampire is always about some kind of transgression. In literature, it was always about, the sexual transgression partially. Without that kind of carnal aspect, other vampire myths kind of came about the transgression of territory or stuff like that. So it always comes down to some kind of transgression.
But I think
The base transgression of course, being that they are also dead that walk around the earth, so that there's also a
Yeah.
transgression of
well, I
natural
think
order.
Temp, you've been quiet for like 10 minutes. Are you okay over there?
Yeah,
No, I'm good. I've been thinking, because mostly thinking and listening, right? So, I guess for me, it's a different perspective. My window into the world of Nosgoth has always been Raziel as a specter for the most part. So I don't even quite think vampires so much when I think Legacy of Kain, which is strange. Because of the Kain part. But
Well, that is kind of one of the kind of genocide of this podcast was me realizing you're a massive Raziel fanboy and that I am a massive Kane fanboy, and the kind of the dichotomy of that and kind of the reflection of personalities it causes. So it doesn't surprise me that you think of Nosgoth primarily as the kind of the wraith spiritual world as opposed to the vampires.
And there's a lot of perspectives you can take if you wanted to. You could pretend like a Story River 2 and Legacy of Kain Defiance don't exist. And you could maintain the perspective of the world completely through Raziel. And if you do that, Kane is still a giant asshole. He's a narcissist. And sort of Raziel.
Sorry, I'm not standing for that. I'm not standing for slander of Kane. 25 minutes, not 20 minutes.
Well, you know who also did it? Raziel. He also did not stand for it, sir.
No, he got stabbed for it, but
Repeatedly.
It's you said it best. It's like Neo Shakespeare, right? I think one thing I would add to what I was saying earlier is one of the things I love about Soul Reaver is the voice actors are so convincing and so charismatic that the drama is unbelievably powerful. So I was always rooting for Raziel. I wanted him to succeed. And like it's weird. The audience wants to find out what's really going on. But I think what makes Soul Reaver so unique is, more importantly, I wanted Raziel to find out what was going on. It wasn't good enough for me to know what the story was. I wanted Raziel to get the truth. So bad. It almost didn't even matter what the truth was, right?
Raziel does have a problem with finding out the truth.
He's an idiot.
Well,
that's his problem. He's dumb as fuck.
That's one thing. Like, it's also fun if you get... Go ahead.
My personal... Sorry, we can cover how dumb Raziel is in the Raziel episode, but my first personal favourite dumb Raziel moment is when he forces Mobius to, like, send him back in time, and then Mobius sends him to totally the wrong time zone, and it's like,
that's the future.
What a shock. What a shock, Raziel.
Yeah.
You have to consider his options as well, though.
He should have considered his options beforehand, but yes.
He's a reading level.
All of his one options, right?
I think but I mean, even so, I think a big part of that's just a reflection of the stuff you start to feel or learn about Raziel as you go along. It's like, this dude is so fucking self-focused, tunnel vision, entitled, whiny bitch.
I will say,
we like him. I love him. I like Raziel, but he is all those things.
I will say,
and he is fucking so driven by like his self-righteous vendetta against Kane that he's fucking right. I'm not gonna get thrown back in time.
I mean, like,
I'm gonna get fucked over.
That's
not gonna happen.
Yeah, like I'm the Kane fanboy, but I will say, like, from Raziel's perspective, Kane murdered him. Like, I will grant the man it's okay to be vindictive and obsessed with Kane when the man literally ordered you.
Initially, it's fair. Initially,
but I mean, like, and Kane knows all of that, and he calls him out on it like throughout the whole fucking series. It's true. It's like, dude, the only reason why you're here is because I hurt your feelings, and you've been chasing me through fucking time with a grudge.
Let's drop the moral posturing, shall we?
Yeah, like, dude, stop that. Yeah, it's exactly
the line of
the line, and
which is another really great aspect of this series is that there's almost no good guys in this shit. There's all dickheads, and they're all cool dickheads, and they're dickheads that you still want to heavily invest in, and you want to follow through their stories. Like Hank was saying, you want Raziel to get to somewhere, even though where are you going, dude? There's nowhere to go. You fucking.
It's like
I do want to.
You know, every one of them is at least competent, even if like Raziel has this problem with like being quite naive in a sense, but even then he's quite competent in other ways, and the whole series is set up like this giant Shakespearean king's drama. Like, this is about powerful, exceptional people, discounting that one of them is an undead vampire, the other one is a wraith or an apparition or whatever. The third one is a sorcerer who can manipulate time, etc. The fourth one is a god, deity, essentially. Like, they all have like lovable characteristics, like as people, and have roles to play, very enjoyable roles in a I would almost say that every game is like watching a play, and every one of the games is like a stage.
Well, that does bring me on to something I wanted to bring up. And Jango first touched on it, and it's somewhat of a disgrace it wasn't mentioned in any of our opening monologues. The voice acting in this game and the dialogue in this game, I'm presuming, like, there will probably be
both most.
some people listening to this who have never kind of fully or seriously engaged with Legacy of Kain, or who have never kind of sat down and watched Legacy of Kain. I presume like there'll be a lot of girls listening to this because they want to have sex with me. But for all of those people, like we're not exaggerating when we say the voice acting and dialogue is
No.
it's out could be out of Shakespeare. It is incredible.
Listen.
Blows everything out of the water.
It
even
really does.
contemporary
Yeah.
stuff.
It's extraordinary.
Like
100%.
I watched cinematics in World of Warcraft, and it doesn't hold a candle to Legacy of Kain.
I find it
Sorry.
offensive
No,
you'd
no,
even
no, no,
bring
no,
that
no.
up, frankly.
Like up front, we should have issued the spoiler warning, and then we should have been like, listen, just so you know, there's no hyperbole in any of
Where
this
do you-
whatsoever. There's no
Like-
hyperbole to be found. This is a voice acting and that shit, amazing, bar none.
I mean, we like Chrome mentioned the line, "Let's drop the moral posturing, shall we?" But if you're listening to this and you haven't, you've either never or haven't recently listened to the monologue at the Pillars, pause this, open up another tab in YouTube, and look up Kane and Raziel at the Pillars, and it's
It's like something out of like Richard III.
Richard
but
III or Henry V.
It's not.
just
It's not
incredible.
for the writing, which is also stellar. Like the
is.
delivery of those are done by stage level actors,
And
quite
it's-
famous ones, I might add.
And like it would have like the line is, "Let's drop the moral posturing, shall we?" Like that, it would be hard enough to say that and not sound stupid, but it just burns out. I cannot, and I think I'd speak for all of us here. We cannot speak highly enough of the voice acting on this series.
Yeah,
it
it's
is
so
yeah,
integrated
Oh
into
my
the world
God.
that it's
Yeah.
it's endemic. Like the game uses its own language.
Or even what's the line? He says to the courtier in the first one, "The stench of the fields hangs upon you like a pall." It's just
Yeah.
like how can you say that and be taken seriously? And yet he is. Temp, you were going to say something.
I mean, I was going to say that it's not. You could say it's the best all day, because I really think, as far as at least gaming goes, it is, and it's competitive outside of gaming as well. But the product of that is that these characters feel unbelievably real even today. Raziel still feels like a person. Part of me will always be rooting for Raziel,
I mean, yeah,
to
absolutely.
get through the plains of Nosgoth, right?
And listen, that is tough to pull off because, like I said, Raziel is such a bitch, and he's not a cool character. He's a dumb.
God,
But
man.
no, dude, it's okay. The cool thing is that he's all those things, but you are so fucking invested in like see what happens, because at some point you realize that the story becomes about him. The story's not about him fucking, doing anything with the Elder God or like even Kane. Really, the fucking whole thing turns into a giant tragedy. You're watching this guy slowly start to discover himself, and once you kind of get that, and this guy starts to see bit by bit, and you get to see bit by bit, it just gets sadder and worse, but in a good way. It's like you want to get to the bottom of it, just like he does. But by the end of it, you're like, basically, you're going to figure out who Raziel is, and you guys are both, Raziel and the audience, got your hands over your eyes, like, I don't want to see anymore, man. But you just keep fucking going. You know it's going to be so sad.
And the twist,
Like, this just gets sadder and sadder.
the twist at the end of Soul Reaver, the first time it just blows you away, and like I think I think it is the first time I can remember, certainly, me like in any form of media, be it book or movie or game or whatever, finding out the twist at the end and then immediately starting the story again to play through with that perspective, and it is
hindsight.
incredible.
Playing the game again is the only other vampire game. Coincidentally, it's a vampire game. Is like I don't know whether you have played Vampire: The Bloodlines. It's like there's always this caveat to playing the game. It's like you should play the game through like with any other clan aside from Malkavian, because Malkavians are naturally insane, but they have this predilection towards prophecy, and throughout the broken fragments of insane stuff that your character says, you actually spoil the events coming beforehand before you reach them, and it's like first you play through the game, you have your insights on what the game does to you, and then playing again with the Malkavian, it's like, aha, so that's a reference to this upcoming thing. And it's like it's very important for like Soul Reaver as well, because if you replay it and if you have the hindsight of like your playthroughs of the whole story, you have these subtle little indications in the dialogue that that I'm so appreciative of that because it's that game is a master of irony. Like every dialogue is dripping with like hidden meaning. Even it's like nothing complex, but it's like
I don't know.
exceptionally well crafted to the characters themselves.
I will say
And
I never played Bloodlines, but I did go on a date with a goth girl who was really into it, who never answered my texts after that date. So I'm presuming it's stupid, and it's for.
You presume you're wrong. You
No, I'm
you,
presuming
you really
it's-
should give that game a
Well, it wasn't a game.
a
She was
try.
into like there's like a role playing, like a D&D style shit you can do for it, something like that.
Oh shit.
Oh, that's just like more. Well, we'll get to it maybe some other time then.
Well,
given this
if
is a
she's listening,
horror cast.
Emily, if you're listening, how dare you not text me back? Anyway, Django, you were saying.
I was not saying.
Oh,
Chrome was saying.
Chrome was saying.
All right, then I'll just wrap this with like a short something like the biggest thing about that, like that hindsight thing and that well-crafted dialogue and everything, the whole story averts one of the biggest problems that modern big storytelling games have, is that throughout the entirety of the series, even if it's like momentarily veers towards it, but it never turns into melodrama. It's not cheap drama, it's tragedy. Like every scene that has like great relevance doesn't turn into a parody of itself.
And
Are you
that's
talking about Soul Reaver still or Vampire?
I hope so. River.
Soul River.
I'm
Like
sorry.
no,
Okay,
I've
okay, I'm with you.
I
Okay.
saw some. Well, some games do turn into the parodies of themselves mid game. So Soul River kind of averts that. Even the humor in that game is like fucking amazing. Like some simple lines is, when Raziel consults with the other guys, like, "Do you think if I tell Mobius that he worships a giant squid, would he believe you?" Like so simple and yet so fitting to the characters
Or
themselves.
of course the funniest line in all of video games. I always was
Yes.
considered heartless.
Oh, yes.
That one, I forgot about that. Sorry, it took me.
I love that.
I
Thing.
love
Like,
that.
every time I see it, I just crack up a smile.
Because
Like
I can just
Kane
imagine
does.
Kane with like a shit-eating grin. He's like, I always was considered heartless.
So, yeah, no worming yourself out of this one.
And I mean, there's no way to like even like with the writing as competent and specific and on purpose as the writing is all through that thing. Like, man, you say so many times the Reaver now fully aroused. Like,
You know that it
you know
was
what you're
on
doing.
purpose.
Come on, come on, man.
Has any of you like studied Shakespeare? Like my literature teacher used to joke around that his sonnets were about 50% like sex jokes.
I will say, if we're going to go in like a
I mean,
Reaver as dick direction, I would like to officially disavow myself from any metaphor wherein the Reaver is a dick.
fully aroused, the Reaver turned its
To be
hunger
fair,
on me.
to
like,
be fair, like if
Yeah,
Raziel
man.
and the Reaver are one and the same, like is a man and his dick not one and the same? But I'm not going down that line of thinking.
You know,
well,
see,
you know.
that's a dick joke done with style.
And see, that's it's an academic dig joke. It's fucking
Yes.
it's high. It's very highbrow, actually.
See?
And again, it's the fucking
One
thing of
game can do this nowadays.
no, it doesn't happen.
Nope.
Anyway,
Well, one thing that I think was touched on by I think everybody, and something that always jumped out to me, is how excellent the world building is, and I think
Yes.
the game deserves a huge amount of credit for not only its writing and the strength of it and its artistic direction and its musical direction. Well, we say artistic direction. The graphics have not aged well, but they don't have to.
Oh,
but the designs are good.
The designs are good.
I
Yeah.
wanted to say that despite working with PS1 graphics, which are essentially
Blocks.
a box of milk, you know, with drawings on them. Even before that, because like most of you have started with the Soul Reaver series, I started with the first Legacy of Kain, which was essentially horror Zelda on the PC
Yeah,
done
I
with
played that. I got that on the PS
320
Store.
by 200, I think, or maybe
I
larger.
was expecting like I was expecting because Defiance was my first one, and then when it came on the PS Store like 8 years later, I was like, I'm gonna buy the whole pack, and I started the first Blood Omen, and I was like, what in the
What the fuck
name
is this
of?
game?
I was born in 1994. What is the fuck is
Yeah.
this? But
Yeah, like well, the first game is unique in a lot of ways, which I think are best left for later extrapolation.
possibly.
But even that, like even in that game, the original design ideas, like it looks silly. It's essentially Muppets done with 3D animation, so to speak. But even then, like in Defiance, if you take a look at how Vorador is dressed, is just an updated version of the original designs done in 1994, and like the visual identity of the games are so strong that there's nothing like that. Like you look at it, it has the same mixture of this Victorian-esque kind of over decorated ruin mixed together with some sort of like quasi industrial steampunk aesthetics done in essentially a world that is either on the brink of collapse and or way past the point of collapse. So it's a giant melting pot of different styles and should I say subgenres because it's I would say that the original timeline of the Soul River is essentially like a Middle Ages themed post-apocalyptic game. Like that world has a lot in common with, for example, Fallout. Only instead of nukes, it's
Middle
vampires and
Ages,
Kane.
maybe some Celtic elements in there as well.
Oh, definitely. Vampire ruins do bring up a lot of like plant-like decorations. Oh yeah, it's visually absolutely unique.
I also say Celtic because there's a lot of like swamp imagery, a
Mhm.
lot of like especially when you get to
You're talking Soul Reaver 2?
Story for one.
Soul Reaver 1?
Even one and two, like yeah,
Yeah, a lot of things look moist in Story for one. But I think I think my brain is literally like gravitating towards Rahab. So that would
And
make sense.
ah, yes,
Zephon.
Rahab, the
Zephon
best
is
glitch in video game boss fighting.
Yeah, that glitch, man.
That shit's immortal. That shit is beautiful.
God, it was
what was
weird.
the
It was
Rahab bit?
good.
He was attacking during the cutscene while
Oh.
having a discourse about the nature of loyalty.
What?
But that speaking of
Sevatar,
the
you got all quiet all of a sudden.
Oh.
Maybe it's on my end.
no, I was just listening to everybody talk.
Oh.
Rare moment of restraint from me. Thanks, Jango, for pointing
Okay,
that out.
alright.
But one thing I wanted to say on the topic of restraint is I think the game deserves a huge amount of credit for its restraint in only showing you kind of enough of all the characters to kind of keep them interesting. Like I can't help but think that uh, a lesser form of media or less, and I don't mean in terms of video game, but I mean a lesser story, a lesser creative team would have made each of the brothers that Raziel has to kill kind of a much bigger deal and maybe overexpose them. Whereas, like I find,
Yes.
just like Zephon to me is probably my favorite character in the series, one of my favorite characters in all of fiction, and Zephon has like 20 minutes, and then he's gone. And nobody he's done. He cool character. Glad you liked him. We're moving on. And that gives
2 minutes of speaking parts. That's
yeah,
it.
2 minutes of speaking part, and despite that, has one of the best lines in the history of writing, which is what is it? Instinct, will,
Forward
reflex.
morsel.
No. It's will, instinct, reflex, action. The insect mind discerns little difference. Like absolute banger
Yep.
of a line, incredible line.
Yeah, it's like it's almost as if the personalities were crucial in designing the characters. So like first came the personality with the style, and then everything in the gameplay was kind of like feels like it was tailor made to the kind of confrontation, especially with the boss fights in Soul River One. It was like everything is also like gameplay wise and visually tailor made to these characters. It's really, really, really. Oh no.
Oh,
Uh, Come on. It's like
Sorry,
almost like if the
for everybody
universe
listening at home,
arranged for these kind of hyper stylized meetings, but it never becomes excessive. Like a modern game would make the Zephon fight, which is quite fast and quite like simple if you think about it, it would make it like a multi-stage 15-minute slog of a super boss fight to make it cinematic because it's a giant character.
And Rahab
Oh,
is the same.
they show Restraint.
It's Rahab that you just shatter the windows and you can do it in like 10 seconds and then he dies, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Even if like the boss fights are like underwhelming, the personal confrontation that happens in that boss fight um, is more than enough to at least. I think I might be able to speak for all of us. Like it's more than able to make up for the lack of like actual gameplay because Soul River One is well, it's quite odd when it comes
Honestly,
to like
I think,
gameplay
and
content.
I may be contradicted on this, but I really do think that the best way to enjoy Legacy of Kain is through like like you can find it on YouTube, like the cinematic cutscenes, because the gameplay just it never needed to be good, but it never was good. Like it was fine.
Well,
it was
I don't know
fine
if
and
I
just
would say
fine.
that.
Well,
I would defer to your judgment on that, Django or
I mean,
Temp,
I've
because
seen Django stream the game and it looked awful.
playing that on the PC was a
Well,
slog.
but at the at the time though, like it wasn't awful. At the time, it was you could do, and if you're not, then shame on you. You could do a whole episode talking about the development of this game,
I can
that
add
game
that to the
specifically, if not the whole series. But yeah, that's a really development of this game is as interesting as anything else. But that one at the time, like it had all the stuff going on, like oh, this is open world sorta streaming environment. He was the first one that did that, and it had all this other shit going on where it wasn't bad at first, and it's still. And now it's only bad because everything else has gotten better since then. But back then,
Also,
like
we
if you played fucking Tomb Raider or versus Soul Reaver One, Soul Reaver One was way more fun to play. It was just a way better controlling game, gameplay wise. Like everything was learning how to do everything back then, which is amazing.
Well,
They did as much as they
At
did.
that time, I think they were trying to figure out how to do like proper 3D platforming and fighting. That really was the age of experimental gameplay.
It was.
Like that's not going to happen again unless there's a paradigm shift in technology.
Right.
well, there's another.
Go ahead.
Well, the win conditions of killing enemies in that game is unbelievably unique, and the win conditions change from area to area because sometimes you have the Soul Reaver, sometimes you don't, sometimes you have background elements. The villains are villains. I guess the enemies in the gameplay loop are essentially immortal, and you need creativity and observation to kill them, and that doesn't really get old. I still, I still feel like that holds up. For the platforming, I think Soul River often gets compared to Ocarina of Time, but I think it's almost more akin to Mario 64. Where yes, is it glitched? Is it difficult? Is it jank? Yes, but you're not going there for a smooth experience. You're going there for the dopamine release you get when you succeed,
Mhm.
and that hasn't gone away. That's still
Oh,
very much alive in Soul River, no
by the
matter
way,
what year you
Temp.
play it in.
By the way, Temp, there's also one important thing to mention that Soul Reaver does, is that while your enemies are functionally immortal, so are you. And I haven't seen that in a lot of games. Because in
Yeah,
Soul
it's
Reaver,
great.
you have no fail-safe state. Raziel gets killed, he reverts to the spirit realm.
If you die
And
in the spirit realm, but you go back to the Elder God,
I think so.
I think that's how it's been a while.
Which is
I mean, I
another
don't
example of how Raziel is a bitch and Kane isn't, because Raziel can just
Yeah.
keep dying, whereas Kane has to
Let
be a
me
man
tell you
about
all
it.
the let me tell you all about the ways that you can die in Legacy of Kain 1 because oh man. While Kane isn't a bitch in that game, there are certainly ways you can fuck yourself over, so to speak.
Um,
I don't know. I just I feel like the only time Soul River 1 really ages badly is when something doesn't work the way it should, like landing on a ledge. That's problematic.
yeah.
And then the excess
Collision
use of
control?
block puzzles. That's really the only aspects I feel like did not survive the times.
Sorry, what was the last thing you mentioned? Block puzzles.
Yes, the excess.
Oh
of
yeah, I thought
The
so.
yeah.
Block puzzles can go to hell.
I think that's something like is that a Soul Reaver problem or was that just like that was the time problem. Everybody was doing
Yeah,
that.
that was the
Yeah.
crunch.
That
You're
was
right.
the fucking deal. Because fucking Tomb Raider was doing it too. Like, you gotta have block
Yeah,
puzzles
but
everywhere all the time, and you gotta have platforming on top of these block puzzles. And the
it was
industry hadn't figured
essentially
out how to
time
do
sinks.
platforming at that point. In 3D, like everybody was still working on that shit.
Yeah. Also, like, just to go into a little bit of the development, like Soul River 1 was about halfway done, you know. Like, the original intention was that Soul River 1 and 2 story would be a complete game, but
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
of course
That's
it was
what-
untenable. Like there were a lot of like tweaking and working around the original ideas when Soul River 1 was released, and uh, I'm actually quite thankful that the gameplay was at least as functional as it was. Saying that on the PC had its problems, like Resident Evil controls. I have Vietnam flashbacks to that and Soul River 1's PC version because controlling that was kind of like to borrow like from Yahtzee, like controlling a fat man on a unicycle.
Mm.
I was gonna say, I'm looking at the notes. Did y'all still want to talk about steampunk?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so raise the curtain slightly for everybody at home, on my agenda notes, I have dark gothic but without the romantic element, and steampunk without the dickhead element. So
I think there's a romantic element. I think there is, but
Really?
it's okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
Not in the way that most people think.
Yeah,
Are we
yeah.
using romantic as in relationship problem, or are we using romantic as in the storytelling version,
I
like
was using
romantic
it
literature?
in a relationship love kind of
Dude,
way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
I don't think
no to that.
I don't think anybody romanticizes anything ever as much as Raziel does himself throughout this
God
whole thing. He
Oh, yeah,
like,
he-
oh my god, I was the best fucking Seraphim noble. Look at me, I was so pretty.
The, Ra- the,
He
the
really
Raziel,
does
ep-
have
the
problems with
Raziel
that.
episode is going to be subtitled Django versus
It's-
Temp, the Thunderdome.
No, I love Raziel. I think and all this stuff, all that shit that I talk is actually a compliment because I defy anyone to write a character as flawed and unlikable and still be super likable as they did Raziel. You never get sick of this guy. You never dislike him. He's never off-putting, really. You still want to stick with him, which is not easy to do with a character who's that much
Mhm.
of a whitey bitch.
Temp might actually get this reference, but I do see a lot of Shinji in Raziel.
I'm raising the no. Sorry. We're not talking about anime. We're not.
Yeah,
I'm
we
exercising.
have reached our anime allowance.
I'm exercising my veto power as host of this podcast. There will be no anime talk in my presence.
Oh shucks.
Well, dang.
But
Well,
yeah.
to simplify, I do get the feeling that Raziel is very quick to jump to conclusions and very quick to sell himself on an idea. Like, he must have been like a really good Sarah fan, so to speak. And then when he finds out, obviously, that
yeah.
his in hindsight, his things like he must have been like again like must be Kane's right hand once he realizes that his role in Kane's destiny is essentially him kinda submitting himself to the whims of fate.
And well, that raises an interesting question.
Yeah, like. Go ahead.
I was going to say it raises an interesting question as to kind of, I mean, discerning what Kane's true feelings and motives. But Rahab does kind of hint quite heavily in dialogue that he and that Kane actually confides in Rahab
Yes.
at a level he doesn't confide into anybody else, and that could just be because I think Rahab chronologically is probably the last brother who's reasonably sane left.
Yes.
And Kane might have just gotten lonely. But that I think that bears mentioning that Raziel certainly does have main character syndrome. Now he is kind of the main character, but it's like I was Kane's number one lieutenant. I am Kane's destined right hand man. I am the Hilden Messiah. I was the best Sarah fan, and it's like, all right, buddy. It's a little Gary Stew. Anyway, Temp is probably foaming at the mouth to defend.
Well, I was going to say that, and that concludes the steampunk section of the podcast.
Yes.
Well, if you guys want to talk about
I mean,
steampunk, feel free. I have very little
Well,
to add to steampunk.
it does
is
kind
part
of
of the
play into the
lore.
steampunk because we need to talk about the future of Nosgoth and the fact that this is to my view, the only time traveling story in video games that actually makes any
Correct.
kind of sense.
Correct.
Well, it does way better than the average Terminator plot.
Well, and the only like
does.
you brought up Terminator, and the only like I think
Easy
franchises that
pickings.
generally do Terminator well, that do time travel well, were like the first two Terminators, and
Well, not even those.
not well, they were okay. Like they weren't bad, but they were fine. And
Yeah. I can give you that.
and Legacy of Kain. Like I mean, what's that novel? There was a sci-fi novel written in the '60s about time travel. I mean, there was
A
a
lot of them.
Oh,
There's a lot of them. Yeah.
uh,
Go on, Jango.
yeah. I don't remember.
Oh,
I mean, I know it, but I can't think of it.
Yeah, it's gonna come back to me. It's gonna annoy me. Anyway, steampunk. If we want to discuss steampunk, feel free, gentlemen.
Well, the fact that originally it started out as like a dark fantasy game, like the first Legacy of Kain dealt with a kind of dark European High Middle Ages style of setting. Seeing Soul Reaver set in like this apocalyptic wasteland with like giant steam pipes, etc., which kind of brings it's again easy pickings. Steam pipes, therefore steampunk. There is a lot of machinery and themes of industry in games. I think in Blood Omen 2 more so than in any other game, but
Certainly.
yeah, it does kind of feed into the fact that the vampire conquest done by Kane kind of took over Nosgoth's world, and the original intention was that they produce these giant smokestacks to create enough smog to block out the sun rays. While Kane and his lieutenants are quite resilient, the vampire race, which spoilers was kind of hunted to near extinction, kind of doesn't do well in the sun.
I just want to interject there. The novel I was thinking of was Time and Again by Jack Finney. But obviously, there's like The End of Eternity, The Forever War. There's a lot of good sci-fi time travel novels.
I'll need to read that.
But the one I was
That's
thinking of
that's
was,
not on
well, if you
that's
haven't read
not on my.
if you haven't read Time and Again, do read it. But read End of Eternity first. Like End of Eternity might be the best time travel story
Will do.
I've ever read. Isaac Asimov. Anyway, yeah. Apologies for interrupting.
Yeah, so I do love the fact that like the vampires utilized the industry and kind of used it to block out the sun and kind of hunted humanity into a subservient, kind of dependent blockade of a species. And also it's what's kind of interesting to me is that like most like the stock fantasy world kind of always has this weird aversion to industrial advancement.
Yes.
And it's good to see that this world actually kind of does have technological advancement, and it's not the usual fare of technology versus magic because both are like countering each other, like in the game of Arcanum, or just the industry is left to the wayside as like some weird alternative to magic. I think like in this way I'm going to praise World of Warcraft's world because in that world technology and magic kind of are coexisting habitually next to each other and both are quite advancing. Like World of Warcraft and by the later stages what's left of the world is kind of Middle Ages the only in style. Like technology is way more advanced than the average the culture that you see, which is also bare bones because by Soul Reaver humanity are barely scraping by. Like there's not enough of humans to.
They're
So,
like chicken wings in America right now.
yeah,
They're not
essentially yes.
Excuse me, what?
They
We got
become
that wing
essentially
shortage
fast
You
here,
guys, you
man.
guys are having a chicken wing shortage.
A chicken wing shortage. So places are carrying thighs rather than wings. And
Whoa.
pushing them out, which is not a bad thing. It's actually probably better.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to look this up.
It's also
Excuse-
chicken wing inflation.
Excuse me a moment. I'm going to spend 5 minutes reading about this.
Well, yeah,
Now we have
Chicken
chip
wing shortage.
shortages,
Sorry,
energy
Jesus
shortage,
Christ.
chicken wing shortage.
Oh
This is
god,
going to date this video.
man, it is. No, but no, I agree with what Chrome was saying. Was something that I've always liked about the games, Soul Reaver 1 in particular. I think going back to I won't say the source, one of the sources, Bram Stoker's
Jesus Christ,
Dracula.
there's actually a
If
chicken
you
wing
haven't read it,
shortage.
dude, yes, there
How
is.
do you have a
It's thing.
chicken wing shortage? You people must have massive industrial farms where you raise and slaughter billions of chickens a day. How are you having a chicken wing problem? I was given to
You should
understand
take
that
that up with the person that has a farm.
I was given to understand that on the Super Bowl, you people just consumed 4 kilos of chicken wings a day.
Thank
Well,
you,
I didn't
Colonel
consume it in the
Sanders.
Super Bowl, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, for anybody who did watch a Super Bowl, our commiserations as a podcast is the Cincinnati Bengals. Who dey?
Yeah. So, if you haven't read Bram Stoker's Dracula, by the way, you should.
You
Anyone's
should.
listening.
It is good.
Come on.
It's one of the
Fuck,
pinnacles of English literature.
Yes, it is.
And written by an
I,
Irishman.
I
of course.
do love the fact that there's a shitload of information that Bram Stoker actually kind of gets wrong because, like, as,
Tell him, Crumb.
yeah,
Get
like
on it.
I live on the border of Slovakia and Hungary, and like this is happening in Transylvania, way above where the historical Dracula lived. But even then, like past the border, go past, like Slovaks showing up there. That's
Look, this is
like
this is
that's just
anti
like my tidbit.
this is anti-Irish
it's-
prejudice. I'm not going to stand for that. As an Irishman, we have
No,
contributed
it's like
maybe
there are
4
some.
good things to the planet. Dracula is one of them. I'm not going to stand for that.
Oh, I'm actually praising. Like
Uh,
it has some weird stuff which are like I won't say that it's like impossible for Slovaks to show up in Transylvania. I would say maybe perhaps improbable, but I'm going to read up on that.
Chrome, you do realize
But
the average listener to this podcast is going to be American.
well, maybe somebody listens in from Europe or something else. I don't care. Like
I
it's
don't,
fun
I don't, I
stuff.
don't
You
wish
know.
to imply that Americans have a tenuous grasp on geography. I wish to imply Americans have no grasp on geography. Just
Thank God that these Soul Reaver games didn't have that attitude, sir. Otherwise,
Yes.
I wouldn't be here right now. You know, like you gotta fucking put the good shit out there so somebody can find it. Otherwise, nobody will. But no,
Oh
no,
man,
uh,
I could wax like poetical about how Soul Reaver could be used to explore themes of Gnosticism. Temp would love that.
well,
it can be used for a lot of things.
we should do,
Yes,
Absolutely.
we
that's
should
the thing
do
too.
a philosophy episode. But yeah, Django, you were talking about Dracula.
What was I saying about Dracula? Yeah. And the some of the world building and the steampunk stuff. A really big like recurring theme and part of Gothic literature is sci-fi, and a lot of people don't really think about it, but it is, and that was one of the biggest things of it's not sci-fi as much in Dracula, but it is about taking this person who is like a very old world type person, like guy Dracula, but he wants to come into the new world and and experience modern technology, what was modern then, and living a life of a more modern person, and that's a huge part of the driving force behind everything in that book. That's why he's there. um and so that kind of like old world and new world technology, industrialization, like all this shit, it's a really important part of the thing. And I think that Soul Reaver 1 having this future, this wasteland that is steampunk and whatnot, like, and to come along with the vampires, to me it's a good fit, and I really like the way that they handled it. I think it's nice, and a lot of people overlook that thing.
It has
I
like actual thought put into it, like the ruins of the original vampires with wings. Like those structures do not conform to our average human needs of doors and etc.
they do.
Those are literally Aries. Like people could fly around them. So no staircases.
Right. Yeah. And what was I saying? Oh yeah, technology, sci-fi, that stuff's good. What else was I fucking saying? I forgot. I'm old. Damn it.
We're all old.
I believe you were talking about chicken wings.
Sorry.
and-
Yeah, no. That was my mistake. Now I'm hungry.
It's just that also the fact that if you put vampires together, your second stylistic addition to that won't usually be post-apocalyptical stuff,
No.
No, and if
especially
it is,
with
then
medieval
it's-
themes.
I mean, like I'm sure there are other examples, but the one that springs to my mind is the Underworld series, better known as Kate Beckinsale in Latex. Well, look, Kate Beckinsale in Latex. I'm not going to stand for slander of that.
I love that film. The
But
first one.
the first one's good, and then
Yeah.
by the time Charles Dance, I love Charles Dance, but by the time Charles Dance shows up in your series, it's probably too late. The post-apocalyptic one is indecipherably bad, which is
They got into hot water with White Wolf with that film.
really.
Yeah, I think so. It does kind of borrow a lot from White Wolf's Vampire the Masquerade role-playing game, I think.
Oh.
Like WWE wrestling, I think also had this problem because they introduced a couple of vampirish characters, and one of them was called Gangrel, which
Yeah,
is a
sorry. So
clan
hold on.
in...
We're getting into late '90s WWF, very
Uh-oh.
much a Sevatar topic. That was
Gangrel?
Gangrel,
Yes.
and Edge and Christian. Yeah.
Mhm.
Correct me if that's
The
not
Brood,
actually
sir.
WWE.
The Brood.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
With and if again, I'll issue a recommendation to the listeners. Pause this. Open up another YouTube tab. Type in the Brood.
Wrestling bios.
No, not wrestling bios. The Brood theme music. It is
Okay,
awesome.
yeah.
Oh, yes.
That is
Yes.
90s,
a banger of a tune.
like and
Absolutely.
90s, like fucking gothic industrial. Yeah, go ahead, go just go get
That
it.
was-
It's a good
Get yourself.
substitute to watching Queen of the Damned, the film.
Oh yes, that wait, Queen of the Damned. Okay, that was the one with.
That was the third Anne Rice, wasn't it? Or was it the fourth?
Interview with the Vampire. I think this was the one with Elia. The
Yeah.
I don't
Queen
think
of the
so.
Damned was the third book in the second movie.
Yeah.
I mean,
Because
to
there
be
was
fair-
no third movie, right?
Yeah, well, they couldn't make one out of Vampire Lestat because that would like there's some there's some very disturbing themes in Vampire Lestat, and I'm not talking.
Well,
about-
Anne Rice wrote the script for it. The script was done. She wanted to do it, and the studio said no.
Yeah,
it went
because-
straight to Queen of the Damned.
Well, I would skip it too because it's a ridiculous story of a guy who wants to fuck his mother. I mean, it's
Oh yeah,
Wonderful.
there's fucking no historical literature about that.
well, yeah, I don't have a comeback. You got me on that one. I don't have a comeback.
I know,
You
yeah.
got me on that.
Okay. God, there was something else, but I like, derailed it 6 times. I'm sorry. Soul Reader was great.
See, you know it's a good game when you can go to Shakespeare, to Bram Stoker, to WWE.
Well, I do want to mention just while we're talking about Dracula. If anyone hasn't seen the Jared Butler Dracula, one of the best worst movies ever made. It's hilarious.
Dracula 2000?
Is it Dracula? I think it's Dracula 2000, right?
Is that what it called? Yeah.
Oh yeah, that movie's shit.
It's shit, but it's
I saw that in theaters.
it's
Fuck that
awesome.
movie.
Not.
See, you saw it in theaters. I saw it while I was smoking pot with several friends when I was like 17, and it was the funniest fucking thing. It was like a Mel Brooks movie. It was great.
I saw the adaptation of Dracula called Blackula,
Oh, that's another
and
one.
like I joke not, like that literally was quite entertaining. Like, you know, the premise is about as subtle as it is, but it was a good film. I literally like
No,
kind of
that's-
smiled throughout it.
I quite
And
enjoy.
it's like,
I quite enjoyed Dracula
if it's-
Untold, which apparently is a hot take, but I quite enjoyed that film. It was stupid.
I
I
did not mind it.
I
thought it was alright.
I quite enjoyed it, but I just like Luke Evans. I find him very.
Oh
watchable.
no. Now I can't disassociate Leslie Nielsen from like Legacy of Kain.
Leslie Nielsen would be a
That
great.
thought just
He would be a great Mobius.
Okay.
He would be an amazing Mobius.
Why not? Go for it.
that would be.
can you imagine like the
yes.
Elder God with Leslie Nielsen's voice?
You two are a pair.
Okay. The only other thing then I wanted to touch upon, and we kind of have touched upon it, is the way it uses vampire lore, and we talked about how it neglects kind of the typical vampire tropes of kind of
Yes.
romance and seduction and that kind of thing. But its use of vampire lore is very kind of circumspect and very select. And I think it's very, very clever in doing so. So Chrome, that's kind of up your alley, so I'll pass that over to you.
Thank God you said Ali.
Yeah.
This is a PG.
Yeah, like-
well, it's not really PG.
Alright.
It's a PG-13 podcast.
Kind of. So to start off, like especially in the very first game in Legacy of Kain, which is as I said, like a Zelda clone. there's a lot of environmental hazards that a vampire fledgling like Kane has to overcome, and one of them are actually like is quite important is that vampires have an aversion to water. Like water actually damages them, and I'm not sure how often that comes up in your average vampire. Like the usual
I
fare is
yes.
decapitation, stake through the heart,
I think holy
running
water.
water.
Yeah,
I
holy
have
Yeah,
sat
water.
holy
around
water.
Yeah, but
and thought
Like
about this too. I've heard the water in general being like a thing that vampires can't do and something else, but I can't remember what it
well,
was.
it's specifically running water because it's a plot point in Dracula that
yes,
they track
Oh yes, yeah.
they track when he leaves England, when he flees England, by noting that he can't cross running water, so he has to take a certain route to the port,
hmm
and they know he can't. Once he's on the ship, he can't leave the ship because he couldn't fly over
yeah,
the movement water. So presumably, like a lake would be fine, but water that's in motion is not. But I do
yes.
think that's something that has faded quite a bit from modern vampire lore.
A lot of stuff in that game kind of like that harkens back to like the original. Like I can vouch for at least some of the stuff that we have here in Eastern or Central Europe or the Balkans. And one of them is what goes back to the original idea of the vampire being a representation of transgression is that running water, like creeks and rivers, used to naturally form borders. Like even today, a lot of border uh, delineation is done, if possible, through natural landmarks. And rivers, creeks, running waters always constituted natural delineations. Like the vampire cannot cross a, a line unless invited. Like there's another like vampire lore that thing that usually isn't represented, and I don't think it's represented even in Legacy of Kain. Is that a vampire can only enter a house if it's invited
Which,
into.
ironically enough, is one of the few parts of Buffy of the
Yes.
Buffy vampires that Joss Whedon kept fully and wholeheartedly. That you need to, and I think there's a reversal, or there's an implied reversal of that as well in Dracula because
Yeah,
when
come in
yeah
at your own free will.
yeah
Yes.
he when Jonathan originally arrives at Castle Dracula, it's come in of your own free will. It's a very kind of rigid or very certain set of words that Dracula uses, which
I do love them.
I always took as being like you have to be aware you are entering a vampire's abode of your own free will
Mhm.
and vice versa.
Yes. Like one of the facts is that like to harkening back to like really old medieval folklore stuff. Um, Another important thing that comes back is that like Cain has several separate forms. Like
Yes,
he can transform into bats, he can transform into a wolf form, etc. Like
and all of those are in Dracula. I think I don't think there's
Yeah,
any
yeah,
forms. I don't
and
think.
typically
mist.
yes.
Yeah, I think all of
It-
the forms Kane can transfer into, which I think, and I think that's unique to Kane. I think that's referred to his as his dark gift. Um,
Yes, because Kane in the games is an artificially made vampire. Like he was
yes.
not a vampire born, because in
Yes,
Nosgoth,
indeed.
vampires constituted a species that lost its ability to procreate, therefore needed to turn humans into
So
vampires.
He was
vampires
a
in the Legacy of
necrovamp.
Kain are very much incels, is what we're saying.
Not your words, not mine. Uh,
But is there actually? Because that's an interesting point that I've raised for myself. Are there
I,
any?
I have to state that Kane and even Raziel to a certain extent are complete chads.
Actually, yeah, and Kane is 100% a Chad. Like you could make a Soyjak Chad meme of let's
Absolutely.
drop the moral posturing, shall we? Like that's 100% a
That that
Chad thing.
that thing needs to happen. That thing needs to
But
happen.
what I was thinking was, are there any forms Dracula can transform into that Kane can't, and vice versa? Because Wolf, Bat, and Mist
Um,
are the main three, aren't they?
he has a mist
Uh
form. He uses
oh
that
shit.
even in the 3D games when he moves through closed
Yeah.
doors or
Yeah,
like
yeah, he
grates.
does.
He does the bat forms like a swarm of bats when he teleports. I think they left the
They left
Wolfman
rats out,
form
didn't
to the
they?
side.
No,
What?
Kane never turns into rats.
Rats, I
No,
don't
I don't
think,
think.
and he doesn't turn into insects neither.
No.
I don't, can Dracula?
But yeah,
Or
yeah.
I'm
either.
not sure Dracula can turn into rats. He can control them, but I'm not sure
I
he
think
can
he
Yes,
turn
he
turned.
into.
can
I think he
control them.
turned into them.
Did he? Because I remember him
Pretty sure he
controlling
did.
like the giant army of rats when he's busting the. Who's the fucking crazy dude?
The crazy guy.
Nopraptor.
No, not. No, the crazy guy in Dracula.
Oh, wait. We're talking about Kane or
Renfield, yeah,
Dracula.
Renfield.
Renfield,
Renfield.
yes.
Yeah, because he directs the rats.
Nopraptor.
Same difference. Whatever.
Yeah, Renfield, Nupraptor. But he directs rats and insects to Nupraptor. You've done it to me, you fuck's sake. Into Renfield to eat. But I don't think he can turn into one, unless I missed that.
Somebody will have to fucking who's right or wrong. I could be wrong.
Well,
I don't think so.
I
But
think he does control. He does control rats. When I'm thinking about Dracula, Kane, and I don't think anyone has like any relevant connections to rats.
No, I don't think they do. I mean, if we're talking about insects,
Can't
then
recall.
Zephon is clearly the insect guy.
Oh, and thankfully, I don't recall rats being enemies as like a standard RPG trope. Nah.
Django, are you? You're
it
typing
does. I'm what?
Because
No.
you,
Um,
I wasn't sure if you were
him-
typing or pumping hand soap, and I was like, I'm not
Dracula
sure.
like turning into what are you talking about, dude? Listen, I'm not doing anything. It's not Soul Reaver. Come on, get on point. I'm
on point.
They're Dracula can turn into almost anything that's like kind of plague oriented or disease infection. But I thought he could, but maybe you're right, and he could only turn into, or he's not shape shifting into rats like he did
Yeah.
bats. But I thought that he did, but maybe he
No,
did.
good, my recollection. I could be wrong. My
That's
recollection
actually
was
kind
just
of
this.
missing from Legacy of Kain. Like Kane's vampirism in, I don't think is ever shown to be used for procreating its species. Of course, it was because he made his vampire lieutenants, etc., or
He did, but
lieutenants.
they were also necro vamps. They
Yeah,
weren't,
but
like,
it was never even shown. But yes, they were raised from the dead. Like,
yes.
don't know about the lieutenants in Blood Omen 2, but the primary Seraphim warriors used in the in Soul Reaver 1, that became his right hand man, so to speak, were all dead when
Yeah.
they were created as vampires.
And also another
And that's part of the
wonderful
reason
twist
why they don't
into-
remember that stuff. And
So
stuff like that.
there's this weird thing with Kane is that despite him being a vampire, he doesn't really like. He only preys on humans. He never is shown to transform humans, living humans, into vampires. And vampirism isn't shown as some sort of plague because that's also an active symbol. That what the vampire is that usually it's kind of like a plague. Like vampirism was a plague.
But he did like the Seraphim people made sense because it's like it was one kind of like an egotistical fuck you. I'm gonna make like these warriors of God into my fucking duders, and also they were just really effective. So it's
yeah,
if
like,
you just take away
there
their
were-
memories. Like I want that effective on my team. Give me that shit.
Yeah, essentially, like, what better way to circumvent your enemy? Use their own troops against them,
Yeah.
especially if they are like.
question. I mean, at the time Kane resurrects the Seraphim, is he aware of Raziel's destiny? Like, has he worked out who Raziel is and
I
who
don't think that's
Raziel is
clear.
going to be, or is it just fate?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure if
'Cause
I
we
don't
know.
I'm not.
think-
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Kane rules over Nosgoth for millennia, so
Yes.
God knows, like, and he's nothing to do but think about this. But it's
Nothing to do.
It's nothing to do. Really.
It's
I mean,
true.
well, he doesn't really
Yeah.
take care of the place.
No, he's fucking yeah.
But like, I wonder because like I'm not sure if the implication of him seeing Raziel with the wings is like realization or confirmation. Like, is this a realization of or is this a confirmation of I
Yeah.
knew it? Like, because there is a distinct look in his face before he says cast him in.
I do think that there's one reference to Kane actually scrying the future. Is that at the end of the first game, Raziel has a confrontation with Kane in the Chronoplast, Mobius's time streaming chamber, and Kane does refer to the fact that when he stole into this place, like millennia ago, like he never comprehended
Centuries
its
ago.
relevance. Yes,
Area.
centuries. Thank you. Like, I do think that when Kane was more or less in power, he spent a lot of time scrying the future. I don't think it's relevant from the overall plot's perspective that Kane knew that Raziel had to become, so to speak, the item to disrupt the coin, to keep it spinning, to not land either or. Uh, but I do think that he kind of had to realize in those chambers that yeah, Raziel needs to be the person that he needs to introduce in this game of poker that is played through the ages.
Yeah, it's that's something I never knew about either. Like when did Kane start like
Yeah,
doing
I,
things
I
to affect time? Like when did
I
that start?
don't think that from the story's perspective it's relevant whether Kane knew that beforehand he raised Raziel and his compatriots, or that realization came later on.
Hmm.
That second one would be quite interesting because if he raised the lieutenants beforehand, he had the realization that he needs to introduce a rogue element into this setup that was crafted for him. Uh, it may have had been any of them. Like, can you imagine if the chosen one for Kane's plan was like Zephon?
That'd be
I think not.
badass. That'd be awesome. I say it as the Zephon fanboy, but that would be badass. Like Zephon's wraith form is just a fucking giant insect. That'd be awesome.
This
The way
thing.
I envision it, I don't think that I don't think that there was much choice. I do think that the others had one or more deficiencies that made Raziel the candidate anyway.
I think Dumas probably could have. Except Dumas
I mean,
comes across as very
Terrell
arrogant.
was
Yeah.
fucking like he's the second one, right? He was buff and he was a
No,
giant bitch.
Dumas is the second, isn't he?
Well, no, I'm,
He's
I'm
the
talking about like the order of the brothers. No, Terrell is right after
Well, I mean,
the order by which
Raziel.
they were
yeah,
raised.
the order
I
of
do
power
think he
or
Yeah,
was.
the order or their which they were killed.
I think Turel and Duma were second and third. I don't know the order.
So Turel's
The
above
second and
Dumas, okay.
third.
I'm almost
Then came
positive that
Rahab, and then came Zephon and
Then
I'm
Melchiah.
gonna
Malchiah.
figure this out. I'm gonna get to the bottom of this. I'm just talking about the ones with like the order that Kane raised them because they each got like progressively less and less of Kane's necrovamp soul, and that's
Yeah,
why
to
they're
the
all
point where
bullshitty.
Melchiah is like fall. We have episodes about the brothers, but where
Yeah.
Melchiah is like falling apart because he doesn't have enough
Yeah,
vampirism to maintain his.
basically just a testicle
He's
by
the
that
shit
point.
brother. Yeah.
Yeah, like I do
Yeah.
feel sorry for Melchiah a little bit. It's
Yeah.
like
Well,
God, that is a
I,
fucking
I do have to fact that
undeal.
while he looks like a dud or a pimple in his vampire human form, but
Yes.
his monstrous form is generally one of the creepiest things ever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's the
would
thing.
love, and I suppose the prospect of a remake is probably something we'll talk about. But it's something I would like if there is a remake. The Melchiah scene in the dungeon with the Crusher is that would be
Holy crap.
incredible in modern graphics.
Uh, uh,
Can you
yeah.
imagine like the whole story was made like a CGI movie? Oh,
Mm,
you can insert the drooling Homer Simpson face here
But
because
I
that's
think
what my
like I mean I think if and maybe this is a tangent, but if you're going to redo it as a modern game, I almost wondered would you need to change maybe the order
no.
of no, but like if because you're going from Melchiah because a modern game built on spectacle, so you're going from Melchiah, Zephon, who are these giant fuckers, like one's taken over an entire building, to like Rahab and then Dumas, and they're just kind of
Well,
dudes.
you can circumvent their less theatrical appearances by having them do more stuff because if you think about it, both Malchiah and Zephon are the least mobile of them all.
That's true. And I suppose like if you were to do Rahab and do it as like a kind of a Jaws thing, like that would be pretty fucking cool.
Yeah, it would. If that was like done in a cinematic way, I think that would be essentially Jaws. And if you get to like Dumas, he's essentially an armored Hulk.
Yeah, like I'm imagining Dumas as like you'd walk into the cathedral and like Dumas is just part of the background. He's just like you almost think
Yeah,
it's a
like
statue.
Raziel is running through gates and like corridors, etc., and Duma is just charging straight through the walls because he's essentially an unstoppable juggernaut.
But I'm not thinking of like when you see him dead before you pull the spears out,
Oh yeah,
and it like it would be you'd think it's like a background, like it's nothing that actually interactable,
yeah.
and then you would see the prompt and be like, oh fuck, like I think that would be kind of cool.
hmm
Uh, which
Temp
one
has
did you
been
say
quiet.
that he raised? The second guy
Tur-
raised the
Turiel was
second lieutenant.
Uh,
second.
I do think that the two most powerful, or how should I say, the second and third, I think, were Dumas and Turrell. Because as I recall, those were the two that cast Raziel into the abyss.
Yeah, they were. Yeah. Terrell was raised second, and then the other one. So it was Raziel,
hmm
Terrell, then that whatever his face you just said, I forgot it.
Dumas,
Yeah, that bitch.
that bitch.
Vamp, you
But
holding
Terrell
on?
kept getting cut from these games too.
Yeah, Terrell. Yeah,
Terrell's a
Terrell was really
man.
lucky to make an appearance in the games after all.
Which that is a really interesting thing to talk about too. At some point, like fucking like
Oh,
there
I,
are retcons. Okay,
yes, yeah. Well,
there are.
Soul
There's
Reverse fully
100%.
was retconned, but like Django, I don't know if it's true, but lately there has been news that they managed to dig up most of the cut content from Soul River 1, and there was already a finished Terrell model
Yes,
which could be used.
yes, I did see that. It's
Mhm.
it's just funny that that him specifically kept getting cut in so many ways. Because he was gonna show up in Soul Reaper 2, but to be fair, each of these games, well, Soul Reaper 1 and Soul Reaper 2 specifically, were so overly ambitious at the beginning that so much got cut. Just like, no, we can't do any of this shit. Because I think Soul Reaper 1 was one of the most like expensive games to develop. Like they were just pouring money into that fucking game, and at the time, because it was
Definitely.
such a big deal, and they were building all this new technology with world streaming and stuff like that too. And at some point, IDOS was just like, I think it's who it was. I think maybe it was like, look, fucking, you better put this thing out. And they, like, and at the end of the year, they started cutting all this kind of shit out, which is still like, I wish they would have cut out fucking puzzles, but whatever. There goes Terrell, and then he shows up. But my point was, I like think I Terrell wasn't that fucking dude. Like, when did they decide to make Terrell the dude from Blood Omen?
Well, I mean, I
Like,
think a recurring
I mean,
theme.
that can be a
From
topic
Blood
for
Omen.
another
Wait, wait. From Blood Omen?
Yeah, hashtag Geek. That
Harsha Geek, yeah.
That's in
Well,
Defiance,
yeah.
right?
Harsha Geek, no spoiler, Harsha Geek is using Turrell. Turrell is just the
Yeah.
host for Harsha Geek.
Hashigik is a Hilda's spirit, but I think the like a recurring theme of the development is Amy Huberman being one of the greatest improvisers in the history
Oh man,
of creative like endeavors.
the amount of bending
Fucking
back
hell.
and doing
But
gymnastics with the lore
So
is
for
amazing.
anybody,
oh wait, you mean Amy Hennig?
what
Who
did
you
I
Yeah.
say?
saying?
Who the fuck is Amy
I don't know. You
Huberman?
said
Hold on,
I
I'll
don't
look
know who
this up.
that is.
God, I hope it's not a
Why?
porn source. Oh, she's an actress.
Amy
Oh,
Hennig,
of
yes.
course. She's the wife of a very famous Irish rugby player. But yeah, Amy Hennig. Because for those of you who don't know, originally and you guys can correct me on this, the decision to have Blood Omen, like the Kane storyline and the Raziel storyline in separate kind of games was taken above the actual creative team. So she had to like just
Work around.
work around, and she, I think she does not get, she could never get enough credit. It's that good a job, because I support women. Of of
You.
well, I mean
I
that
support
seriously.
Soul Reaver, so
Like she
know,
like she ties up
get there.
so many the loose ends so
She does.
well, and like
Yeah.
she makes Terrell being cut out of like 3 games in a row, and then it's like here's why he wasn't there, and it's like, oh, that actually is a pivotal plot point in the whole series, which is
Yeah.
exceptionally well done.
It is a thing. Who was it? Like Blowman wasn't made by Crystal Dynamics and that whole thing. Like there was a whole different creative situation. That was Silicon Knights, I think.
Yes,
Did
it
Blood
was.
Omen. And like that whole lore and that whole shit was so fucking different. And of course, Soul Reaver was Shifter, like this other game that like was just prototyped out of the mechanics of Soul Reaver, not the story, and they
Yeah,
put
and
those
they
shits
just
together.
kind of wanted to do something with this, the Legacy of Kain license as well, so they
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
made it into
And
like a
I love the
continuation.
idea of her being presented with the script for Blood Omen 2,
Yeah, like
this bizarre
Put this
futuristic
into
cyberpunk
this.
shit, and being like, yeah, work this in, and being like,
Yeah, yeah.
Hilden, fine, I'll work with
I
that. Fuck it,
I
I'll
am
figure something out
amazed
here.
by the fact I am amazed by the fact that this game's series development was a masterclass in getting higher up mandates thrown at you and working around that in order to create something that is still remembered as an exemplar of good writing and good story crafting.
Absolutely. And on
Like,
that then,
I am amazed because this game, by all probability, would have had a couple of lore screw ups. While it
Oh
does have a
yeah.
few, it does have a
but
few.
very minor
There's
ones.
none of them that's like. I don't want to harp on Mortal Kombat's
Well,
latest
yeah.
iterations, like stuff. It's nothing
No.
invasive. Like there are more like lore questions that raise more questions rather than lore problems that go
Problems, yeah.
against the
And that,
established, three timelines because it has three
yeah, yeah.
timelines.
And that's absolutely very important to distinguish between lore problems and lore questions, because you switch to Kane and like there's so much we were talking about it a minute ago where you don't know what
Mm.
Kane's doing and when and whatnot, but that's okay because it makes when you switch to Raziel and you move Kane into a thing of
Yeah,
keeping him
like
mysterious and not showing everything about him and making you wonder, oh, was Kane doing this? Was Kane doing that? That's how Raziel is, and it feels more fun for you, the
so
player, to
it's
do that stuff.
so there's the
Um,
problem of like in Blood Omen 2 that Vorador is suddenly alive. Like that's not explained, and that does raise quite a few questions. But his presence is never, intrusive to the overall functionality of the world because the resurrected Vorador isn't crucial in the series of events that follow up from there. Like his presence, his resurrected presence, is not the cornerstone on which the whole functionality of the story,
right.
finishes or breaks.
And if I could
Yeah, yeah.
just kind of, I suppose, jump off the praise of Amy Hennig to the last topic I wanted to raise, um, the presence or lack thereof of kind of female characters, women, those things, um, in Legacy of Kain, because as we talked about
There
this
are, yeah.
kind of earlier in vampire lore, vampire like Dracula is like centered on Lucy and Mina. Now, there's I think you can raise some very very obvious kind of questions of agency and kind of feminist analysis of Dracula, whereby neither Lucy or Mina are really characters; they're really just vectors.
Yeah, but historical
Yeah, but
context.
like it was written in the 19th century. I mean, they probably thought like I mean, I'm pretty sure back then they they thought orgasms were some kind of epileptic fit.
Mm,
But that is like that's a recurring trend, kind of the female presence in vampire stories through Nosferatu, through Interview with the Vampire, through Buffy. It's it's an ever present. Whereas there's like who's the most prominent female character? Ariel, and she's dead.
Uh,
yeah.
Ariel, you can also there are quite a few female characters in
There
Legacy
are.
of
There's like
Kain, but
Uma and shit like that, but yeah.
they are kind of like
Mm.
not tokeny, but
It's the
Ariel is.
sausage fest.
Well,
It's a
well,
hell
the
of
only one
Of
sausage
course
fest.
it
the
is.
only one tokeny is who's the chick in Blood Omen 2?
Oh,
Uma.
no.
No, it's not? I thought it was Uma.
Duma is the
Not Duma, Uma.
Uma. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank
It
you.
is
Duma
Uma, is
and
it?
Uma.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's Uma.
Yeah, that was very clearly just kind of
Which
shoved
is
in there.
kind of weird because Kane does have some sort of attraction towards her, but
I consider that
events
non-canon. I
in
reject that
Blood
entirely.
Omen 2 transpire as they are, and Kane is way more of a, how should I say, Sigma male grind set vampire to give it to,
But I consider the kind of the attraction between Kane and Uma borderline non-canon. Like
That game has problems,
That game has
but
a lot of problems.
it's still crucial. But the depiction was actually like that game tried to do a 3D and better version of Legacy of Kain 1. Oh, and by the way, Legacy of Kain 1 do have female characters that are quite important. Uh, Sadly, one of them, which is a damsel, the King
King's daughter,
Otmar's
yeah.
daughter.
Ariel is
And
in that game too, right?
yeah,
Ariel's
she is
in
in that game, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And quite a few opponents, like supposedly two of the more dangerous Pillar Guardians are female.
Yeah,
Like,
there's a bald chick with big tits.
yeah, The Energist, which is basically a bald woman who is also a living nuclear reactor.
And has big tits.
And Azimuth the Planer, who is actually quite crucial because, um, spoiler alert, Azimuth is the one who is looking for the Soul Reaver in the Legacy of Kain Blood Omen timeline, but uh, it is her doing that Terrell gets transported from the future back into the past.
Boy,
Azimuth is the one who rescues Terrell from his immediate fate of execution by Soul Reaver. Oh yeah, there are plenty of badass chicks in Soul Reaver as well, but they're not the focal points.
yeah.
Temp has been quiet for a long while.
Yeah, Temp, we'll have to be wrapping up soon. Would you like to introduce the smoky accent into us?
Yep.
Is Temp alive?
He doesn't have an accent.
Temp has a lovely.
He's not muted,
accent.
but we can't hear
Well,
him.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Can y'all hear me
There
now?
he is.
Yeah, you're alive.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm mostly just trying to catch up on the lore of Legacy of Kain, and also
Fucking
I've never read
casual.
Dracula.
Oh man,
Oh,
you're
Jesus
missing out.
Christ, you've never read Dracula?
I wish I had. I got like 50 pages into it, and then I got busy.
You got 50 pages into it and there's no like pictures, nothing to color in, so the American education system told you have
No
to take-
anime?
Oh come on!
It's okay. It's okay.
No,
Listen,
but
You
one day
got time. In life, you have time, and you should do it.
Oh yes.
It's a good
Most of my favorite things about my job is I can basically catch up on things I can't normally do while I'm at work. It's great.
And you use that time to watch
Awesome.
anime and nothing but anime.
I do other stuff.
He's in the lab, right?
Well, he does manga as well.
Yeah.
A lot of fighting games in between. Yeah.
Yeah.
Learning KOF.
It works.
Which is an anime fighting game, might I add.
Yeah, well, I mean, come on. There's like two of them that are not.
To be fair, like Kane would have been made a funny addition to Mortal Kombat, but
We're not
nobody's
talking
gonna
about
put-
guest characters in Mortal
Yeah.
Kombat. That's a
Yeah.
fucking war we've all been through.
As much as I loved RoboCop as one of my favorite films, like, and I do like his addition in MK, you cannot take that seriously anymore. Like that's done.
Anyway, Temp, you were going to say. Sorry, Jango, to cut you
Yeah.
off.
Oh no, go ahead, Tim.
Well, I just I honestly, it's just I didn't really have much to say on the vampire stuff. To tell you the truth, it's the lack of something to say. If I'm being honest, it's just the one swan, really.
It's not really something you associate with a Catholic. Django, you were going to say before we move into the
I was gonna say something, and then it went away again. God, this keeps happening to me, man. I'm gonna die one day.
Well, we have been recording for
Fuck.
well over.
Oh,
an hour. There we go.
sorry, I found it, and I hit my knee. I was just going to like tag up on that whole thought there about like, yeah, comparing the two, there are retcons and inconsistencies in Legacy of Kain, absolutely. But by this point, we've come way further and seen so many other games try to do that, and franchises try to have a long running narrative and stuff. And obviously, Mortal Kombat is one of them. And like by comparison, looking back, it's like wow. So Legacy of Kain is basically flawless. It's basically perfect, and there's so much stuff that's lined up, and it fits well. It is specific and put right where it wants to. The narrative that it seems weird. It seems bizarre. Looking at so many game narratives these days.
It does have payoff. That's what I think.
It has what?
Payoff. Like,
oh yes,
it's a whole rounded story which is kind of open ended because it could have been continued, but finishing the story with Defiance was actually quite cathartic, and the whole series actually has like a good sense of payoff.
It does. Yeah, it does. Almost everything in in those games, all the games, the whole series, at least, especially by comparison to today's stuff, it all feels very self-aware and on purpose, and just knows what it's doing, which is really interesting. Something
It's
that long and like over a decade. Like I don't know when, like the year that Blood Omen 1 came out to
I
Defiance
think
came
it
out,
was like 96. Let
96.
me check.
And Defiance would have had to come out
Yeah, it's 96. 90,
in
I think it was
05.
like October or November of 96.
Well, as fascinating as that as the discussion of
It was
the month it
great.
came out
Like,
is,
listen, yeah. Way to go, Amy Hennig. That's my point.
way to go,
Anyway,
Amy Hennig. All right, so on that note, I think maybe it's time to wrap up because we have
yeah.
hit the 90 minutes.
Yep.
Gentlemen, any very, very quick last thoughts? I think the next episode I have down as being a discussion of the world of Nosgoth, so hopefully that will be of interest. So anything you want to say to our loyal listeners, who I'm sure...
I would say, well, I would say it's definitely worth at least watching the games. Playing them is better, but if you can watch these games, you should, because even to this day, as old as this series is, and as few installments as there were, Soul Reaver and Legacy of Kain still weirdly has the market share on certain storytelling elements that you cannot find anywhere else. And that has not changed after like a million years. So I'd still recommend anyone who hasn't checked these games out to check them out. Yeah, that's all I got.
Django?
Yeah, it's really weird that this is one of those games that's really hard to like recommend to people. People sometimes will ask it, especially when I was playing that stuff on stream. By the way, you can go check that stuff out. I think it's still up there.
Check out Django's
Anyway,
stream. Django...
yeah, plug me.
GM... Django...
Django. No, it's Django AF. I think it's all one word on Twitch. But yeah, it's hard to point people there. Which is why I say go to the stream. Um, yeah, it's maybe don't go play it, but watch it at least. Educate yourself. It's so weird. There's no rebate for this game or anything like that. But that's a whole other topic. It's weird. It's really weird.
I mean, that should be an episode, 100%.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
it is.
absolutely, absolutely.
It's going to be.
Yes.
And Chrome, any very final thoughts?
Game's good, way Victus.
Very Victus indeed. Okay, so that is going
You
to
don't know how good it is. You don't know. It's going to surprise you if you haven't done it before. That's all.
Yeah, like one of the greatest pinnacles of game design done for the art with love and without any corporate cynicism to throw at it. Like genuinely one of the best efforts of game development.
And
Yes,
indeed,
like,
one of the best.
So high up there.
Even aside from game, like moving on from game development, one of the best stories. I think a lot of people
Yep.
exaggerate stories. Like certain people in the Mortal Kombat community will tell you that Mortal Kombat is one of the greatest stories ever told. We don't need to get into that, but
It depends on which way you look at it, because, as I said, MK9 works best as like the naked gun of fighting games.
that does work. But Legacy of Kain certainly is a story that transcends.
It is, yeah.
But that
It's
vastly transcends the average dire story in video games.
like I said. Yeah, no hyperbole. I'm fucking dead serious.
Like
Everything
if
we've
the
been
Legacy
saying
of
is
Kain
true.
was a novel series,
Yeah,
it would be one of regarded as one of the best novel series.
Even if you have trouble with the gameplay of like Soul Reaver 1 and 2, and if you're masochistic enough to try out Legacy of Kain 1, even if that's not your thing, you can still watch lore and everything else about the game on YouTube. Really check out the world, even if the games don't play the way you are comfortable with. It's still like a cornucopia of things that you probably haven't seen yet.
And on the, I didn't think we were going to use the word cornucopia in this podcast, but anyway, that is going to do
This
it
game
for the first
to me.
episode of History Abhors, a podcast. Thank you all. We had 3 viewers at one stage, which is incredible. I'm presuming that's both Jango and Temp and some randomer.
Shit.
If you are listening to this on Twitch, on the Twitch archive, it will in time be posted on the Nethercast channel on YouTube. Otherwise, you are probably listening to this on the Nethercast channel on YouTube. In which case, hello. So, with that, we will leave you at that, and we will come back to you soon. And yeah, goodbye. Thanks for listening. Say goodbye, guys.
Manus Celer Day. Goodbye.
Yeah, take care, everyone.
Fully aroused.
You stay classy, Nosgoth.